Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Hi. So this presentation is going to be in English, but we also have some Bookassist staff here from our Rome office. So if we have questions later, then feel free to talk to them also in Italian. So I'm going to talk today about ideas around how you can optimize conversion on booking engine technology. And it's important, I think, to realize that from our perspective, the way to optimize booking has to start with the entire strategy of the hotel. From our perspective, the strategy for direct booking needs to be the heart of the core strategy of a hotel. All of the strategies can work outside of that, but if you don't focus on direct at the start, then you find yourself in a very difficult position because you are working a lot with distributors who are spending very large amounts of money and have very focused strategies and that can drive business through the distributor to your hotel. So largely, you are working against some of those people who are distributing rooms on your behalf. So obviously we want to focus on direct because every single customer who comes direct to your hotel largely gives you extra money for exactly the same product. And if we look at a really simple example, and you will know this, but I just want to use it as an illustration. Suppose we have a particular package that we're selling and we're selling it on multiple different distributors. Then what we can find here is that your net revenue, the revenue that actually remains for you, changes quite specifically depending on which particular distributor you're at. And that's basically the commission type deal that you have. So a cost of booking, what it actually costs you to get that particular booking, can vary quite significantly. And if you look at having your own booking engine where commission might be quite low, then the actual cost of booking, the mechanical cost of booking, can be quite low on a booking engine. Of course, it's never that simple because you also have to spend money on marketing, but we'll come back to that in a second. So I just want to use this to illustrate where you can find the funding to begin to drive your direct business strategy. So if you look at this kind of approach, selling on booking.com can sometimes cost you significantly more than selling direct, and of course on Expedia is usually more expensive again. So what I want to do is to look at the idea that we take one single booking from one of these channels and we move it to direct. We'll talk about how we do that later, but if you can achieve this, then moving one single booking from booking.com to your direct web could save you over 50 euros. Now, of course, you have to spend to do this, but as I say, we'll come back in a second. So if you move it from Expedia, for example, you could be saving over 80 euros on that booking. So if we can move just one booking, then here's what can happen. One booking that I move, and I continue to do that every single day, and I make that saving every day. But I don't put that money simply in the bank, I invest it in my ability to drive direct business. So if I invest that profit by just one a day, I'm actually generating a possible saving of over 20,000 euros in 1 year. And if I now take that 20,000 euros and I invest it in my own business so that I can actually spend it on marketing, on websites, and on strategy, then the result of that is that I will generate even more bookings directly. And so for every single booking that I generate, I am creating that extra saving. And by the time I'm finished doing that process, then I can certainly save some money as profit, but if I continue investing in my business, I'm growing my direct base, all the time reducing my costs for third-party distribution. And so this is what we call the direct booking optimization cycle, and it usually costs money to start the cycle, but once you generate the cycle and keep it moving, then it becomes a real ability to generate funding in order to fund your strategy. So coming back then to the idea that how do we actually get that higher conversion so that we can generate more of these bookings with effectively the same cost, then the issue here is that there is no simple solution. If you actually want to generate higher conversion and higher bookings, there are lots of different things that you need to do together. So I'm going to walk through a few of these things to show you that small changes in lots of places are the solution to making a big change in your total business and therefore your profitability as a hotel. So the typical kind of questions that we get asked are, how can I really compete at search? Is it actually worth competing anymore? If they're spending so much money, does it make sense for me to even do search cost spending anymore on advertising? How can I be sure that my online presence is effective? Is my website working for me? How do I know? How do I measure this? And finally, is my online conversion good enough? Of all the people landing on my website, am I really helping them to convert into customers for me? And so this breaks down into 3 areas that I'm going to cover today. Your visibility online, the kind of platform that you're using and if it's optimum for you. And finally, how do I understand user behavior so that I can understand conversion better and make those fixes? So let's start on the first area of these 3. So visibility today is mostly about dealing with search. And search has become quite a complex area. It's very difficult to compete unless you really understand the details of what is happening. And remember that if you are actually competing against very large OTAs like Expedia, Booking.com, they only do one thing, which is to work on selling hotel rooms. Whereas in your hotel, you're probably doing multiple things. You're dealing with distributors, you're dealing with direct sales, you're dealing with trying to manage websites, etc. So typically they have a better focus than you have when it comes to actually generating revenue online. And if you look at a typical Google search result today, then Google does not appear to be helping us either, because almost everything you see on the first page of results, whether it's on screen or whether it's on mobile, is actually dominated by advertising. And even though most people know that the first results are advertising, more than 80% of people still click on those first results. So how do you deal with this sort of scenario? How do you win against OTAs when they're spending such enormous budgets? We don't want to be spending huge budgets for acquiring customers online. What we want to do is spend the correct budget so that we get the right return on investment. Well, actually, if you look very carefully at this, the key is how do you optimize your spend? It's not the amount you spend, but how optimum is that? And so if you do want to compete against OTAs, then you actually have to play the same game as they do. You just have to play it very, very well. So let me give you an example of why this is not as difficult as it might first seem. So I'm not sure if anybody recognizes this number. I don't think they will. But if you look at Booking.com today, you will see a number slightly bigger than this, because this was the number of properties that Booking.com was listing yesterday. So you go to the front page of Booking.com, and down at the bottom it tells you how many properties they're listing. Last year, according to figures that were released by Google, this is the amount of money that Booking.com spent on advertising with Google. So that's $4 billion. So how do you compete against that sort of spend? Well, the reality is that when you look at this, for all of the properties that they have to advertise, Booking.com is spending less than $150 per property per year. So it's not about the amount of money that they are spending, it's about how optimum they are in the way that they spend. So they understand how to do online marketing, and it's important that hotels understand those tricks as well, because it's not about the amount of money you spend, but the way that you spend it. So pay-per-click advertising can actually be successful if you know what you're doing. So to give you an example of this, this is a hotel that we work with in Dublin, for example. Trinity City Hotel, and if you search for that hotel, then what you see is 1, 2, 3, 4 search results, but also a search result over here in meta search. So basically, because we understand how to do marketing, because the hotel understands how to market themselves on their website, then they actually can get into a position of owning the search result page. So if you know what you're doing and you understand how the search patterns work, then you actually can compete. So here's an example where we're using site links as well, and you'll see that the site links are very specific about booking and the kind of offers that are available. And they're exactly the kind of thing that brings travelers in and converts them into booking. So again, it's not just about being present, but it's about understanding the strategy that's needed in order to drive business. And also on the additional links here, we are using specific content in the website which matches against the kind of searches that are being done for city centre hotels, in this case in Dublin. And so we are feeding back to the web the same information that the web is feeding us about what kind of searches are happening. So when you understand these things, then you can actually be successful at those areas. And of course, we're also using meta search, where largely you have to compete on price. So owning the search result page is actually possible, provided you're very careful about understanding why people are searching and what they are searching for. So how do you live with OTAs then on search? Well, the first thing is you have to use paid advertising on your own brand, because if you're not advertising simply on your brand, then certainly the OTAs are. So there are no longer any free ways to basically get into the search engine results. You have to pay for advertising on your brand or somebody else's advertising. Secondly, you obviously have to have better rates or packages on your website than the OTAs have. And this seems obvious, but yet many hotels still do not do that. But more importantly, you have to tell people that you have those. And that again is what I was using on the site links and search results earlier, where we specifically listed packages that were available so that we bring people directly into those results. And thirdly, you should actually use OTAs, but you should use them for reach. So use them for getting that business that you cannot normally get, but then make sure that that customer becomes a repeat customer or a possible direct customer for you. And I'm not sure how many of you in hotels do this, but every time a customer arrives in your hotel who has not booked direct, you should be firstly thanking them for arriving, but you should say, you know, next time, please book direct, and maybe you can give them a better room, you can give them some special, but you have to talk to your customers about the way that they are booking. And that is the only way that the industry will change the mindset of the customer, is by actually talking to them about the way they are booking. And actually Booking.com believe in this approach as well, or at least they say they believe in that. Here's from the Chief Marketing Officer of Booking.com. Every property owner should use Booking.com as a customer acquisition, and then try to do everything to make that customer book direct. So there is a possibility of living directly with the OTAs and both helping each other as well. But please talk to your customers about the way they are booking, and that's how the change can occur. So moving on to different ways of dealing with search, there is one area that's super important for all hotels and becoming more important because of mobile, and that's the area of local search. So what we are used to in search, for example, is that there is the paid part of search, which we've just talked about, where you have to pay for your advertising budget. There's then the organic part of search, where you can adjust your website content to make sure that you're appearing for the typical search volumes that are happening. But increasingly, there's this area of local search, which is related to information on map-based searching. And one of the beauties about this area is that because it is based on location, only you can play that game. So anybody can advertise on your name, anybody can advertise about content, but only you have your location. And so when you're on a map, only you can talk about what is right at your point. Nobody else can do that. And so you have an opportunity here to improve your visibility on map searches, for example. And map searches are actually becoming a critical part of how people plan their holidays, their breaks, their trips. They're now going directly into maps to see what's in the city, and they're finding locations, and that's where you can play the game. So for example, it's a specialized form of local search engine information. It's about businesses that typically are serving the community, so walk-in businesses, so it really works well for a bar or restaurant in your hotel to be able to advertise that and bring people towards the hotel business. And it's very strongly focused on mobile users, because map search is what mobile users are mostly deploying on search. Some numbers here: more than 45% of all searches on Google are now seeking local information. So if you're not optimizing your local search capability, you're missing out on this. Secondly, 40 to 60% of our hotel clients, what we are seeing is that hotel website visitors are coming through local search to the hotel website. So this is a huge change in the last 2 to 3 years, where local search and map search is now beginning to really play a strong part in how businesses are found. And you can see this because when you actually look at Google's knowledge graph on the left, then Google's knowledge graph here is almost identical to the information that they display on the map page itself. And so optimizing your Google Knowledge Graph and Google My Business is now critical, so that you can actually be found clearly on map search and local search as well, and drive up your potential for extra traffic. So again, on local search, you have to make sure that you have a complete and accurate profile of your business across all of the search touch points. And that's not just on Google, but obviously on Apple Maps, also Bing Places for Business. And remember, these might be small parts of your search. Apple Maps might be 5%, Bing might be 5%, but the only way to win on total conversion is all of these small issues brought together, optimize all of them. So each little part needs to be optimized in order to improve overall business. Secondly, you need to have consistent and accurate business listings across all of the potential points that are recommending to travelers, whether it's Facebook, Yelp, or otherwise. Again, this is extra work, but it is important that these are up to date. And thirdly, on local search, managing reviews is critical. Google is really strong on reviews, and if your reviews are newer or more fresh, then you move up on the quality score in terms of Google search results. So Google wants to show fresh information to people, so you need to be managing your reviews, and you also need to be getting reviews or encouraging your customers to give reviews as well. So all of these issues allow local search to become stronger for your property, and therefore to become stronger on mobile and stronger for your business overall. So that's local search, which I think is quite a new thing to start optimizing, and people are not really optimizing it yet. But then there is also meta search, which I'm sure most of you are now using, but maybe not necessarily controlling. So many hotels are distributing room prices to third parties, and those prices are appearing on meta search, and they don't really have full control over that. So the first thing I would say about meta search is that if you're not actually controlling your position on meta search, you're missing a huge opportunity. And it's important to realize that you are already on meta search, because if you are not controlling it, then somebody else is selling your property on meta search. So you are already there. So again, just like regular Google search, it's important that you take control of the situation by actually controlling the pricing that you're showing for your property directly. So here's some interesting statistics from the full year of 2019. So if I look at what we are doing with meta search for hotels, the average that hotels are spending across different markets, you can see here. So basically, anything up to 3,000 to 4,000 euros per year is the typical advertising spend that hotels are now using on meta search platforms. So this has gone from zero a couple of years ago to a significant spend. So obviously, if you're spending 4,000 euros, you want to make sure you're getting good value for money. And here's an example of the return on investment that's now coming per platform, according to what we see in Bookassist in 2019. And you can see that the return on investment is now quite similar across different platforms. So whether it's Skyscanner, Kayak, Trivago, Google, etc. And what's interesting about this is that this doesn't tell the whole story, because actually what you really need to do here in terms of these channels is to understand that not all the channels are the same and they don't all work for you. So each hotel basically has an optimum set of channels that should work for them. And the best way to look at this is actually to look at the return on investment against the booked revenue. Because even though something like Skyscanner has a very large return on investment, you don't get that many bookings. But by far the best right now, and this is quite different from 2 years ago already, is Google Hotel Ads. So they are giving you high volume of bookings and high returns on investment right now if you're optimized. So it's changed quite a lot. Trivago last year started to slip, but Google Hotel Ads started to go ahead. But knowing the difference between the return on investment and the booked revenue per hotel is an important one for you to decide which channels will work for you. So within Bookassist right now, for example, with the hotels that we are working with, we're getting a 12 euro return for every euro spent on metasearch. So that makes it a viable return. Quite a good return. And when we look at the total number of bookings that are coming through the system, 25% of the direct bookings for hotels using metasearch are coming from metasearch. So it is clearly creating a large volume of direct connection to your guests. And it's a popular channel for your guests to follow also. So on metasearch, my first point is you have to be there and you have to be in control. Secondly, understand, of course, that channels are rate sensitive, so there is no point in being there unless you have control over your rates. And that means that if you are using third parties who are distributing your rooms, you need to stop that happening and you need to be in control of your pricing on metasearch. Otherwise, you're wasting a lot of money. And thirdly, ideally, you want to use a metasearch service supplier that can actually move your budget between different channels, and not just between channels, but also between different target markets and even at different times of the day. So for example, you may be targeting In the afternoon, you may be targeting European travelers on Trivago with a certain amount of your budget. But overnight, you may want to target travelers in the USA using Google Hotel Ads. So you need to have a supplier who can move your budget, your advertising cost dynamically across multiple channels and multiple markets. That's important. Remember, we're in a 24-hour world, so just because you happen to be looking at something in the afternoon doesn't make it viable for everyone. So there are a couple of areas around that visibility part that I talked about at the start of those three issues. So the second part that I want to talk on today is about changes in user behavior. And this is something that we track very closely, and we have the advantage in Bookassist of working across multiple markets in Europe and now in Latin America and North America now as well. And we're seeing some very rapid changes in user behavior. Not surprising, right? Because we're all users and the way we do stuff changes all the time. So you cannot have a single view of what a typical hotel booker is doing. They are changing regularly. So one of the things that has happened over the last number of years actually is that cancellations have become a far bigger issue than they used to be before. And this was largely driven by OTAs, because OTAs have this policy of saying, you know what, if you're thinking of going to Florence, you should book 5 hotels and you can figure out which one that you're going to use later on. And the result of that means that it's caused a lot of problems for hotels, but of course for OTAs it doesn't matter because they still get the booking at the end of the day. So cancellations, what we call just-in-case bookers, we need to watch them very, very carefully. And I have some interesting stats here about that. So we did a survey at the end of last year across all of our hotels in Europe. 42% of hotels said that cancellations were now over 30%, right? There's online cancellations over 30%. I remember when that was less than 10% about 10 years ago, so this is a big change. Secondly, 51% of hotels actually said that cancellations were less than 15%. Now this is really interesting, because what's the difference between the hotels on the left and the right? Well, the difference, which I'm going to go into, is the ones on the left are not in control of how they're actually selling, and therefore why cancellation is happening, because the ones on the right are in control in some way. So I want to show you some points here about how we get to a situation where we can perhaps control cancellations that little bit better. So the reason why this is important is that these just-in-case bookers are leaving you, of course, with these last-minute inventory that you have to sell. And sometimes that means you have to drop your price in order to sell that room. So it causes a problem with your ADR immediately. But there are other issues. For example, just-in-case bookers, if they're booking and they intend to cancel later, they are stopping that room from being sold to people who might genuinely want the room. So you're losing real potential business by people booking just in case. And thirdly, if you actually go back to the first point that I mentioned about the entire search optimization and meta search, then you are spending money to market to people who may not really want to stay with you at all. So they are wasting your marketing budget. So it's really important that we keep cancellations or control cancellations at a low level, because it's just simply wasting money for us. So we've plotted here the cancellation rate versus the booking lead-in time on average for hotels, starting back from January 2018 right up to the present day. And this is what the graph looks like. And what you can see here at the bottom is the lead-in time, so how far ahead were they booking, and the cancellation rate going upwards. And what you see here basically is that these guys, very high cancellation rates if people are booking about a year in advance. So that's people who are booking 10 hotels and they'll figure it out by the time they get there. So if you look at OTA cancellation rates here, they're far higher, and this is directly on hotels. So the one thing I would say here is beware of early bookers. If people have booked a year in advance, I think it's a fair chance that you can say 50% of those rooms you should probably overbook, because they will probably cancel. So overbooking is something that you need to start looking at in terms of the lead-in time for your current bookers. Secondly, how near to arrival date are bookings actually being cancelled? So when do you finally find out? And this is an interesting one. There's quite a variation here from 0 to 2 days, last minute up there, 3 to 7 days, 1 to 2 weeks, all the way up to more than 4 weeks out, which is about 40%. So when we look at this, almost half of bookings are being cancelled in your hotels within 2 weeks of arrival. So real last-minute problem for the hotel. So what can we do about this? Why are people canceling, and is there something we can do? Well, as I said, it's been driven by OTA policy for booking multiple hotels, but that doesn't mean that you can't control it in some way. So reasons why people might book elsewhere, cancel a booking. First, elsewhere. They've actually found a better deal in another hotel, right? Fair enough. What's worse for you, maybe they've found a better deal for your hotel somewhere else. That's a big problem, right? And then finally, they probably may have a genuine reason for booking. So there are three basic categories about why people might book. Now, the key about this is that you actually have some control over these first two factors. Because you certainly can competitively work on the first area, and on the second area, that's all about control of your distribution. So you actually can influence some of these areas directly and help to reduce your cancellation rate appropriately. But you have to work at it, right? None of this is simple. You have to understand your cancellation patterns and also find out as best as possible about why people are canceling. But it's not all bad, right? So 26% of those hotels that we surveyed reported that OTA cancellations had actually reduced in the last year. So something they were doing was helping to do that. 28% of hotels reported that direct booking cancellations had reduced. So these hotels we started talking to in a lot more detail to find out why they were managing to reduce cancellations in an industry where cancellations were going up. Hotels showing lower OTA and direct cancellations were those who had a very clear direct booking strategy. Going back to my very first point, they were the hotels who had direct booking at the center of their total strategy, and everything else came secondary. So we simply asked them, what are your secrets? What are your approaches here? And here's just a number of things that they've said, but it's really interesting that some of them are just thinking a little bit about the idea that your distributor like Expedia or Booking.com are service providers to you, not the other way around. So you use them the way you need to use them. It should not be that they use you. So, for example, raising the cancellation policy on OTAs to 3 days, whereas you might have immediate cancellation on your own website. So making your website that little bit more favorable. Or the one right at the bottom, which is really, really easy to do on your website. Give direct bookers something really different and make sure you tell them. One of the things that I see a lot is that hotels on their websites are still simply saying, my hotel is in this location, here's my price, you should book my hotel. That's not going to help your direct business. You have to say, you should book my hotel on this website because this is what you get, which is different when you book on this website. And very few hotels are actually explaining to customers why they should book on the hotel website. They are spending all their time just explaining why they should book the hotel in general. And when you do that, the chances are the person will go back to an OTA and book the hotel. So remember, on your website, you do not have to convince people to book your hotel. You have to convince them to book on your website, which is a different purpose from previously. So that's a little part of cancellations, which has become quite complex. But it also means that we have to now be careful when we talk to our digital marketing agencies or when we look at our performance, because cancellations are now having a big impact on what the real return on investment is. So with cancellation so high, what do we actually mean by conversion today? What do we mean by return on investment? These things have actually changed quite significantly. So typically, we looked at the number of visits that we get to our website, and we looked at the number of bookings that we get, and we made a comparison of those to say, well, here's our return on investment, right? So return on investment was the total value of bookings I got divided by the cost that it took to get those bookings. And that's not really valid anymore. So if your agency is using this approach, then you're not getting a full picture and you're not optimized. Because the reality is that bookings are now influenced very strongly by cancellations. And so it's not just about the visits, but the bookings and the cancellations are now converting to what we would call a net booking figure. And so you have to take these into account to lead to a net conversion figure. So if you are not currently measuring cancellations as part of your bookings for ROI, then you're getting the wrong figure. So true ROI today is the value of bookings less cancellations divided by the cost of visits. And it's really important that you look at that, because if you look in analytics today for Google Analytics or other analytics packages, they are probably not factoring in cancellations because that's something that comes out of your PMS later. It's not something that is seen on the website. So here's a typical thing in Google Analytics for conversion. And you will see, can't see the figure very well, but up here, e-commerce conversion rate of 2.93 for the website, which is not bad for a website, but that's not the full figure because it's based on the actual bookings that happened. Google Analytics is not tracking the cancellations here. So what we actually focus on now is what we call at the top there conversion rate optimization. So we now look at the total conversion rate, the net conversion rate, including cancellations, and we seek to find a way to optimize that for the hotel. So it's important to realize that looking at the website conversion in analytics is probably not much use to you anymore. Firstly, there are people canceling and you're not seeing that. Secondly, a lot of people are going to websites from local search where they're just getting information and they're not necessarily going to book. And so again, you have to look at what is the real number that matters to me if I want to optimize my return on investment on advertising spend. And so what we recommend now is that you actually have to talk to your providers about your booking engine conversion rate. Because once people get to the booking page, then they are the people interested in booking, and that's the conversion rate that you want to look at. There's lots of other people who are just there to look at your bar, your restaurant, your spa, or otherwise, and that conversion doesn't really matter. So one of the obvious things, and I like showing the next graph because it's kind of obvious, but yet most hotels are not doing it, is that you have to have availability on your website booking engine if you want people to book. It's kind of obvious, but let's look at some figures. Here we're plotting the booking engine conversion on this axis against the date, the percentage of searches which had positive availability. So right over on the edge, if I have more than 80% availability across all possible dates, then my conversion on the booking engine goes right up to about 6-7% on average there. If I don't have availability, my conversion drops a lot. It might sound obvious, but for some reason, many hotels do not actually put all their available rooms on the website, but instead, they will give them to OTAs. They will say, I'll give 10% to OTAs, 10% to my website, etc. That policy is meaningless in the face of high cancellations. You should be putting total availability on your booking engine on your website, and you should be allowing a certain amount of overbooking depending on your new cancellation rates that you're tracking. But fundamentally, if you're not giving availability, do not expect people to book. 10.7% is the booking engine conversion funnel that we are currently achieving in Bookassist for the top 100 hotels that we operate. And I like putting that figure up because that's a challenge to any of our competitors. That is a very high figure for conversion, and it is based on, as I mentioned before, getting all of the other parts of the path to purchase correct. If I actually look at the really highly optimized clients that we work with, we're reaching over 14% booking engine conversion when I look at the top 20 clients that we operate. So in other words, it can be done, but you have to do a lot of work on all of those areas in order to get to the point where conversion is possible. So, how do we deal with the idea of cancellations, conversions, and otherwise? You have to know your figures extremely well, and you need to know them per channel. Some channels are worse than others. You need to work on that and understand what's happening. Secondly, you need to change your approach to show real value in direct sales. You have to talk to your customer online about why they should book directly with you and not somebody else. And it's important to keep your availability highest on your own channel because, again, overbooking is eating that availability on other channels and will cause problems for you later on when those rooms are released, and then you have a problem trying to sell them at the last minute. So one of the things that's important in user behavior right now is beginning to understand how people are booking in the future. And most of you will already deal with pickup reports. You may be looking at pickup reports which are across the entire of your stock, so directly from the PMS. And what we wanted to do was to get people to focus on the direct pickup on their booking engine to see if they can identify issues. So we've released a new platform just this week called Bookassist Pulse. And the idea of this platform is that it focuses on direct business, but also it sits in your pocket. So if you're the GM or the owner, you don't have to go into the PMS and find some complicated file. It's sitting there as an app right on your phone that you can look at dynamically at any time. So I'll give you two examples from this. One, when you look at the screen, you can basically look at the idea here of arrivals, bookings, or on the books. So this is showing bookings, and it's showing for the particular period that you selected, it's showing revenue, ADR, room nights, and bookings. So that's just the status of where you are, for example. But if I tap into revenue, I can see the detail of how my revenue is behaving either in the previous 6 months or later on, as you'll see, in the next 6 months. So in other words, as an owner or a GM, I can very quickly get a picture of how my business is performing every minute instead of having to go to a complex report. If I switch to the On the Books tab, this is where it becomes interesting because we're looking at user behavior. And right down in the bottom there, find out how your user behaves when the booking is made. That's the pickup area. And when I go into pickup, I can actually see the performance of direct booking going into the future for both my target period and my pickup period. And again, the advantage of this is that it's in your pocket and it's focused on direct business only. So it allows you to quickly see what is happening with user behavior as I go forward compared to last year. So we're hoping that this kind of information will at least help people to focus in on their direct business that little bit better, rather than having to go through detailed and complex reports from revenue managers. So finally, I'm going to look at some platform specifics. So we've gone from search through user behavior, and now we're getting into actual platform at the end of the funnel to see if we're actually optimizing our path to booking and optimizing our direct business. And in the first place, I just want to focus in on mobile because, as we know, mobile is moving extremely quickly. We're all used to using mobiles at this stage. We're beginning to see that those people who are the highest users of mobiles are now beginning to move into the segment where they will be spending more money also. So increasingly, they will be driving the actual purchases at your hotels as you go forward. And we also know that network speeds are going to make mobile move even more quickly to a dominant position in our business. So I want to show you two very interesting statistics. One is about traffic to mobile for full year 2018, and we compare that to full year 2019. So in 2018, this was what traffic looked like across Europe on mobile devices versus desktop. And by the time I moved to full year 2019, then basically this is what traffic has done. So it has increased, okay? So what we're now seeing is that across most countries in Europe, we're heading to more than 50% of our business being generated on mobile. But it's interesting when I actually look at revenue as distinct from traffic, because when I look at revenue, revenue is much lower. But as I go forward into last year, you'll see double-digit growth in revenue on mobile. So people are beginning to spend on mobile a lot faster than just the traffic is increasing. So we are seeing rapid increase here. And so the portion of direct revenue being generated is now above 27% in Europe. And so that's a huge opportunity. It's one that we're seeing the confidence is coming back. So what our key is, are we capitalizing on mobile opportunities within our hotels? And so our booking engine, we focus very much on the user experience on mobile so that people are getting instant information, pricing on their calendars, etc., so that they have less work to do and they get that kind of app experience, which again helps on conversion. And one of the things we've noticed is that good UX is really shortening that path to purchase and making conversion much higher. I'll give you some simple results. In the first 6 months of the usage of that new mobile platform last year, we actually saw average booking value on hotels using that go up by 32%. So that's a real advantage. And also the number of bookings on mobile went up by 17%. Here's an example of where the green bars are the mobile system versus the previous system, a real increase in conversion based on the year previously without that new mobile system. So on mobile, you need to make sure that your hotel is on mobile, and you need to make sure that your mobile booking engine is actually fit for purpose as well. And finally, you need to look at payment systems as well, because payment is a real barrier on mobile that causes a problem. So Google Pay, Apple Pay, these things are the solution to basically getting people to convert and also reduce cancellations on mobile. A simple question, are you always giving the best price? And this may not be that easy, because OTAs are very good at mixing prices across different special offers. And one of the things that we've been doing in our booking engine is trying to tackle that with what we call intelligent pricing. So if you look at, for example, a 4-night stay requested across 4 nights, you may have different special offers which are valid, but you may have a problem, for example, on direct bookers there, only 2 nights of that special offer are available. for a 3-night stay, it's not valid on the first night. Early bookers, it might be only valid on 2 days. And a typical booking system, this is the only solution for the typical booker so that they can book. With intelligent pricing, we are actually going to mix the discounts that are possible for the guest across different nights and actually create a new special offer dynamically so that the guest always gets the best price compared to what previous booking engine approaches might do. So that mixing of prices is something OTAs can do quite well as well, but it's important your booking engine can do it so that the guest gets the best offer. Does your booking engine avoid saying no? Booking engines quite typically are saying no every time people put in a date and they can't get a proper booking. So here are some solutions that we're doing. So when you do say some dates are not available, obviously you can change the date. That's the obvious one. But what we're also doing, like I showed you on mobile, where we have pricing directly on the calendar, is allowing people to look at that flexible dates calendar and make their own decision about possible times they may actually travel based on pricing that's visible on the calendar. But we're also offering alternative accommodation. This works very well for hotel groups, but it also works for loose associations between hotels where you would normally, if you're overbooked, send a customer to another hotel. Then directly in your booking engine, you can also do that, and they can do the same for you. So the idea here is to keep the customer converted as a direct customer and not let them go back to an OTA and find a different hotel. And so providing those alternatives in your booking engine may be small things, but it's the sum of all those small things that actually help us to grow that business, and we have to work on all of them. Another area that we've just launched on the booking engine is what we call intelligent room substitution, where you may have in your hotel a setup of different room types feeding off the same availability. So in this case, for example, you may have a single room available but not available on night 3, a double room but it's not available on night 3, and a triple room which is not available on the 2 nights. The customer, in this case, is requesting a double room for 4 nights. So in the normal scenario in a booking engine, that's not available because that room is not available. But we notice in the booking engine that there may be other rooms available with that availability, and so we can now substitute availability from other rooms and basically mix those in order to allow the guest to proceed without them even knowing that the booking can actually happen. And so then the hotel can make arrangements about moving rooms around themselves, but basically we've allowed that guest to actually book and proceed. So again, it's a way of us trying our best not to say no to a customer once we've got them into the booking engine. And that's the reason why we can drive the conversion upwards. So finally, I've talked about a lot of things here. We need to capture a guest for sure, right through the search funnel. We need to convince them through our website that they should book on the website. And then we need to convert them with proper booking technology. All of these things need to be done together, and they need to be continually done in order to optimize our business. They take a lot of effort and they take a lot of work, but as I mentioned right at the start, you actually have a budget to do this because as you go ahead and do all of these things, you are generating that optimization of booking, which is allowing you to actually build up your business and reduce your costs per booking. You can reduce your cost per booking with direct. On OTAs, the cost per booking remains the same all the time. So even as you do more bookings on OTAs, you pay more. But as you do more bookings on direct, you can reduce the cost of booking per booking. So there's a lot to do for sure, and it all has to be done if you want to optimize. I'd invite you, if you want, for your hotel to get a free health check of your hotel. We're on the stand right outside the door here. So thanks very much for your time. Thank you.